spent. Nigga, where am I going? Dropped the four with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Dropped the four with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going?
We are going to another episode of HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. As always, this is the show that values time and puts God first. So let's get into it. We are running a little bit late here already. My apologies for that. So there's been a lot of discussion. We're going to go here for a little bit for this first segment, different than normal. There's been a lot of discussion in regards to all the different champions we've had. We're going to have, for the first time in NBA history, 7 different champs in 7 different seasons, right? And there's a lot I could go on here about. I've said multiple times in the past, I think part of what is showing in this era is that we don't have that true all-time pantheon guy. And that's not to be disrespectful to Jokic or disrespectful to Giannis. I think the world of Giannis, I think Jokic is easily the best player in the league. We have some all-time greats. But when you transition out of, we don't have a Magic who won 5 titles or a Bird who won 3 titles. We don't have a Jordan who won 6. We don't have a LeBron or a Curry who's won 4 or a Kobe with 5 or a Duncan with 5. Those true all-time top 10 guys who are stacking up all the titles. That's been the history of the NBA. And I think when you get into that next tier of guys, you know, again, those are the top 10 players to ever play the game. The best of the best, the greatest we've ever seen. When you get into that next tier of guys, still all-time greats, but just not quite there. You've got your Hakeem who gets 2. Giannis, I think, is in that category who's got 1. Jokic in that category who's got 1. You know, maybe one day we'll look back and Jason Tatum will be in that category. Now he's got 1. And whoever wins this title, which most likely it looks like the Thunder, so SGA, maybe he ends up in there when his career's all said and done. He gets 1. The lack of having those guys, those all-time top 10 pantheon guys, is that you're going to see more and more of this. A team only win 1 title. I do think there is also the problem with the product that is currently on the NBA floor is really hard to win more than 1 title. So think about this. Growing up, depending on your age, this isn't going to apply to you. But for me growing up, one of the biggest things was you can't shoot too many jumpers. You can't shoot too many threes. You had to have a post game. And the reason is because you could not consistently produce the same thing night in, night out, the same product, the same offense by shooting a bunch of jump shots, shooting a bunch of threes. It would lead to inconsistencies. It would lead to bad shooting nights, and that would lead to losing games, losing playoff series. And then we had this guy, Steph Curry, come in the league. The greatest shooter ever, and it's not particularly close. We will debate and argue everything in sports. One of the few things we don't argue is Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of a basketball that we've ever seen. Any of us, it doesn't matter your age group, it doesn't matter when you started watching the game. Steph Curry is by far and away the best shooter in basketball. Excuse me. And so because what he was doing with his teams was just shooting the shit out of the ball. And they were winning playoff series, titles, winning 50, 60 plus games, 70 games. It changed our view and our perspective on all of this stuff. Now, when you see teams like the Celtics, who made more threes than any Steph Curry-led team, made the most threes in NBA history, what does that create? And they shot a good percentage. But because they're not exactly Steph and on those Warriors teams when they were really dynamic and at the peak, what they had Clay, Kevin Durant, two of the other 3 or 4 greatest shooters of all time. Because they're not them, the Celtics team, despite how many they made and such a high volume, they were susceptible to, they could go cold, they could miss some, that could lose them a game or showed to lose them a series. Charles Barkley is one of those famous things he used to say for years and years and years. You can't win a championship shooting jumpers. And while you might have a run, like the Bucks, when they won, there was enough shooting around Giannis being dominant inside. They were able to get a title. Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, they had enough shooting around Giannis to get them a title. Jokic and the Nuggets, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., KCP, Jokic himself. They had enough shooting. They could get on a run. They got themselves a title. This Celtics team last year, and there's shot the shit out of the ball. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, Porzingis, Derek White. They got themselves a title. That product seems to work for every team besides exactly the greatest shooter ever and 2 of the other greatest shooters ever. That seems to work for about 1 year. And now, with that being said, I also want to discuss this, and that this style does inherently hurt ratings and the product on the floor, or the discussion around, does it hurt ratings and product on the floor? So ratings have been a constant conversation in the world of sports and these pro leagues. The NFL is just beating everybody up, and it's not even particularly close. The NFL is the most watched thing on television, and that's with, and I know NBA people love to say, well, NBA numbers aren't as big because people are illegally streaming games. People are illegally streaming NFL games too, and they still put up ridiculous numbers. When it comes to the product that these teams put out, I've said this a bunch of times too throughout the year, there's an art of watching sports that we want to watch superhuman people do superhuman things. And while I might know and you might know at your core, you can't really go into an NBA game and shoot 30, 40 threes and make however many of them to win the game, and you couldn't really play the style that has become the modern NBA, but it looks like you could. It absolutely looks like you could. You just dribble down, you could dribble a basketball, you go down the court, you're at the three-point line, and you make 1 pass, 2 pass, boom, shoot a 3. To the average person, that looks like you could do it. And I think that hurts. You don't watch an NFL game and go, oh, I could do that. I could do what Derrick Henry does. I could do what Myles Garrett does with these really elite NFL players. I could do what Patrick Mahomes does. There's that art of these people are superhuman. These people are Superman. These people are bigger, stronger, better, faster than me. That we just like. It's that old school gladiator feel. That old school, man, look what these guys are doing. And so that, I believe, hurts the product, especially during the regular season. Well, now let's look at the playoffs. The playoffs, and this is, we're trying to address everything with the NBA here. The playoffs, one of my big issues is there's clearly an agenda here when it comes to the referees. And I'm not going to say this is whoever wants to instill this. I don't know if this is the referees. I don't know if this is Adam Silver, the league as a whole. We're going to be more physical. Okay. Because physicality is something that's always been in the NBA. It feels like it's been removed as the hand check was pulled out of the game and other things to make the game become less physical, more open, more shooter friendly, and that has helped. But there's also an easy argument to say that it's hurt. And in the NBA playoffs, again, OKC took advantage of this. They're like, hey, look, We're going to put Alex Caruso on Jokic because we know human nature, the little guy guarding the big guy, the little guy can just flat out get away with more fouls, get away with more contacts. I know Nuggets fans are really upset, but that's the reality of it. Shaq used to get fouled all the time, but he was so much bigger than everybody that they weren't going to call every foul because Shaq didn't even react the same to every foul. If you gave Shaq the same calls as other players, well, Shaq would be the all-time leading scorer and would be close, even if you only hit 50% of his free throws. When you see the upped physicality in the NBA, in the playoffs, now, I don't think it should be totally just agenda-based that, okay, we're just not going to call fouls, or we're just not going to call this type of foul, or I think the refs, if you want to allow a certain style, that's fine, but just be consistent to what you are going to call and what you are not going to call. Ratings for the NBA, a huge part of why they're down, and a huge part of why we're having all these different champions. Because the product is the product on the floor, what people want to watch. And is the product on the floor something that we want to champion as an NBA champion? And this goes back multiple years. Again, we loved, even if we hated the way the team was built because it felt like an inevitability, we loved how the Warriors looked when they played basketball. We loved how it looked. It was the exciting version of the Spurs. The Spurs forever were boring with Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, but their offense, to a basketball purist, was actually pretty exciting. There was motion, they had movement, they had a style of offense. Duncan in the post with a bunch of different post moves. Parker, Duncan, pick and roll, Ginobili. Like, that team was boring because it was in San Antonio and there wasn't a lot of personality, but the actual style of basketball was interesting, exciting. The Warriors took that same style, but they were exciting. Steph had flair. Klay Thompson was much more likable early in his career. Draymond was much more likable early in his career. That was an exciting team. Kevin Durant when he got there. Now the product, and the best way to identify the problem with the product of the current NBA game is this OKC Thunder should not be the team that wins the title. Now, they probably will. They're better than everybody. But here's just the biggest issue. And again, there's a lot here. Say what you want about how physical the game is now, or what's a touch foul, what's not. But the problem with the Thunder and the problem with this, again, agenda potentially that the refs have is it's got to be league-wide. Everybody's got to play with these rules. The Thunder play really great defense. They do. The Thunder are also allowed to play an entirely different game than the rest of the NBA, apparently. The NBA playoffs has been discussed heavily in regards to the physicality, in regards to how many fouls they're not calling, the physicality that they are employing, all this stuff, right? Except, and the Thunder are probably the best example of it. The Thunder Nuggets series was super, super physical. Except one guy continues to get away with, if you touch him or you're in his space, even if he initiates the contact, he's still getting the fouls called. Everybody else is getting less fouls called. There's just free throws, except for one guy. And that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And SGA is a great player. SGA is my MVP choice. The Thunder are the best team in basketball. But if they had to play defense against themselves, how fast would Alex Caruso and Lou Dort foul out if they had to play against SGA? The product of the game of basketball and what makes it so different from the game of football is the NFL, and we watch a lot of bad quarterbacks. We watch a lot of bad teams. and we still go out there and watch them in droves. In baseball's resurgence, the Rockies are potentially the worst team of all time. And there's 30,000 people a night just about going to watch the Colorado Rockies. The Thunder, if we put that on the NBA final stage, Shea, who, yes, has an amazing handle, has a great mid-range. Also, when he really needs to, puts his head down, throws his body into somebody, and now, and this was, you can go look at the highlight, I can't show it, but what he has really perfected is this happened on Jayden Daniels last night. He puts his foot in between yours, and he is initiating the contact. So when you fall and trip, they give that as a foul, and they are cautious and on behalf of the offensive player. And so he is stumbling. He is putting his head into you. Again, look at game 7. And the way they play defense, Aaron Gordon got a foul and they wanted upgraded to a flagrant because he ripped the ball through, which something they teach you. When someone's in your space, rip the ball through. Because the Thunder, for whatever reason, Caruso and Dort are allowed to stick their hands in there, push you, be as physical as they want, and we're not calling a foul. But if you are any kind of touch foul to SGA, we're calling it. And that is different than how they've treated everybody else in the playoffs. So if we're going to have physicality, and this is the product we want to put out there, keep it across the board. It's what makes them unlikable. Like, they might be the best team, and they probably are, and they will probably win the title. And there are things about the OKC Thunder that are commendable. I think there is sometimes a little too much love given to Sam Presti, and I do think he has to win a title in order to justify his spot of greatest GM ever, which a lot of people want to give him. But this is an unlikable team. And I say all this to say, this is the culmination of what has become a very unlikable product in the NBA. You can't have every team trying to go out there and shoot threes. Okay, cool. You can't have a guy who puts his head down and trips and gets foul calls and free throws his way to 30 points a game. You can't have, this is why Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves, who are my pick, would be great for the NBA. There's a little bit of everything. You have this old school big defender, all-time defender, Rudy Gobert. You have this dynamic guard, Anthony Edwards. You have a great coach. You have depth. You have shooting. You have bench play. They do pretty much everything you would want to promote in the game of basketball. The Pacers even would also fit this. I've been wrong about the Pacers all off-season or all postseason. The Pacers also fit this. But the product of basketball needs to be better. If we're going to continue the way the NBA is going, we need this to be better. Yes, there's parity. But even the NFL, which gives you, the NFL gives you quote unquote the idea of parity, and we're still excited to go. People get excited to watch their 7-10 teams. Their teams that are 6-11, or now they're 7 teams, so 6-11, a 7-10 team. People still get excited to watch those teams. Versus in the NBA, who's excited to watch their middling team? Who's excited to watch these potential final matchups? This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily. And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in this morning. We did get off to a late start here, so we're cutting, not serious, or takes terrible enough for Twitter. So the NFL does this with scheduling every year, and the NFL scheduling team is, you got to give them the credit. They're pretty fucking good at this, right? And one of the things that they're doing, they make a handful of bets every year, and you can see it by where they place teams prime time on the schedule. So, starting with, the NFL is continuing to bet on what is probably the last run for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, the Chiefs have 7 primetime games. It's the most in the NFL. The NFL's not dumb. Yes, the Chiefs just got blown out in the Super Bowl, but they are aware this is probably Travis Kelce's last year, and say what you want about the Taylor Swift effect. It is real. It generates money. It generates views for an already humongous product. So if this is probably going to be Kelce's last year, take full advantage. Get the Chiefs on TV as much as possible. Bet on Taylor Swift. I know, crazy. Just a way out of left field thing to do, right? So Chiefs get 7 primetime games. I'm cool with that. I get it. I'm not really going to sit here and debate much there. Now, what I think is really interesting, though, is we just had a draft with 6 first-round quarterbacks, right? Now, the way they are betting on these quarterbacks is where they have them in prime time. So let's start with the number 1 overall pick last year, Caleb Williams. The Bears, a lot of their primetime games are the back half of the season. What does that tell you? You have Ben Johnson. You've got new pieces, new offensive line. This might take a little bit of time, especially in a really tough division. I think the Bears can be really good and still finish 4th in the division. That's how good the NFC North is. That's not a disqualifier to the Bears or taking a shot at the Bears. I think Ben Johnson could be great. I think Caleb could be great, and this could still be a 4th place team because they are in one of the toughest divisions in football. If not the tough. Them and the AFC West, I think, are going to be right there. But the Bears having their primetime games on the back end, what they're telling you is, hey, this might take some time, but by the time we get to the end of the season, this is going to be a really good football team. This is going to be a good football team to watch. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. Boom. Let's make this, that's what we want to see at the end of the season is a quality Chicago Bears team. Cool. What are they doing with the Commanders? The 2nd overall pick, Jayden Daniels, Commanders made the NFC Championship game last year. They have a very notable primetime game, which is, and this also involves my favorite team, Monday Night Football, Commanders versus Broncos. Let's just settle this out right now. Now, to the world at large, because the Commanders went farther in the playoffs, this is easily a Jayden Daniels, best rookie quarterback. Cool. Statistically, though, Bo Nix had the most yards, touchdowns, total touchdowns. So let's put them on Monday Night Football. The quarterback that was statistically the most successful and the quarterback that was the most successful because his team went farther, and general consensus, even as a fan, Jayden Daniels was the best rookie last year. Let's throw them on Monday Night Football. Let's show the world if by this point in time, again, this is towards the back end of the season, let's see battle of the quote-unquote 2 best rookies from last year, how they produced. Love it, right? So, Chiefs, 7 primetime games. Let's get the most out of Kelce. We just had all these rookies come in last year. Let's throw them towards the back end of this year. We'll throw Caleb towards the back end of this year because he's got a new coach, a couple new players. This should all be working by the end of the season. Get them going. Cool. We'll put Bo Nix and Jayden Daniels Monday Night Football. The Commanders have several primetime games. We are really going to bet heavy on Jayden Daniels. The Commanders have 5 primetime games. The Commanders, understand this about Washington. No, they weren't 2000s Cleveland or 2000 Detroit as this super dysfunctional franchise, but they weren't far off. And because of the old ownership group, they felt like an untouchable franchise to throw on major marquee games. There were moments you could do it, but you had RG3 his rookie year. That was a moment. You had Joe Gibbs, his return. That was a moment. But for the most part, this was an unlikable and untouchable franchise, and no one wanted anything to do with them. Now, with new head coach, new ownership, new quarterback, they're super marketable. They're super likable. They're getting the primetime attention they deserve based on the success and the revamp and the rebranding they've done. Shout out to Washington. It's all great. Shout out to them. Then we have the Cowboys, which this is a bet that the NFL continues to make, and I understand it, although I also get why a lot of fans don't like it, which is when you have something that is easily marketable, easy to sell, you do make a bet that it is going to continue to be easy to market and easy to sell. And Dallas Cowboy love and hate, the Cowboys have the second most primetime games. Why do the Cowboys have the second most primetime games? They weren't the second best team in the league, or they weren't the second best team in their conference. Hell, they weren't even the second best team in their division. But they are so easy to love and hate. The NFL is betting, and it's a very easy bet. You'll be honest here, that they are still going to be in the year 2025 a huge draw, even if they get blown out. That Ravens-Cowboys game, now the Cowboys ended up coming back in that game, but that game was still doing numbers into the third quarter, and the Ravens boat raced them the first half. Just came out, running the ball, Lamar, Derrick Henry, dominated them, and they still had several million people watching that game deep into the third quarter before the Cowboys started to make a comeback. The Saints-Cowboys game, week 2, where Derek Carr looked like, remember, at one point, through 2 weeks, Derek Carr was the MVP. Now he's retired. He was the MVP through 2 weeks last year. Still, Saints put up 50 points on the Cowboys. People still watched. And the NFL said, and now the Cowboys have had consecutive 12-win seasons. They having some success. So throwing them on a bunch of primetime games prior to that wasn't a big deal. Last year, they were not good. Now, with the emergence of Washington, obviously nobody thinks they're better than Philadelphia. The NFL is still betting, saying this is still going to be our biggest draw. Give them 6. Now, you know what the NFL is not betting on? You got a team like the Steelers, where are the Steelers' primetime games? Well, one of them, against Green Bay. Now, why would the Steelers, a franchise with the second, they're tied with the 49ers, with a franchise as well established and as great as the Pittsburgh Steelers, why would one of their only primetime games be against Green Bay? Could it be that the only time the Steelers are going to be interesting this year is that if and when Aaron Rodgers does sign with them, that him playing against his former team is one of the only times it's going to be exciting to watch? I made this bet last year, and we'll see if I'm willing to make. We have my boldest NFL predictions coming at the start of next hour, where the Steelers will land. Again, Mike Tomlin's never been under 500. We know that. And I've said since the beginning of last year, I don't think that really matters, because the second you're really under 500, no one's going to care that you didn't go under 500 for a decade plus when you're sitting at 4-10. No one's going to care. No one's going to care. Now, I think Mike Tomlin's a great head coach. I just don't think the Steelers have enough talent to be that good or really that relevant. So the NFL's making a bet that the one time we're going to get the Steelers really exciting is either against the Baltimore, or if Aaron Rodgers does sign there, which all signs says that he will, that they're going to be only interesting when they play the Packers. Says something. Again, the NFL schedule makers, they're really good at this. They make a bunch of different bets. You go look again. The Chiefs, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, makes sense. Even though I think the Chiefs are on a decline here. Also, Chiefs fans, and I've said this before, why I don't want to start this. We don't need to start a kiss the ring argument again. But yeah. So, other thing here, really quick, before we go to the top of the hour. I obviously wasn't here for hard right, hard left. Brock Purdy got paid. Brock Purdy signed a 5-year, $263 million extension, $53 million a year. Look, would I have done it? No, I've said that multiple times. I would not have paid Brock Purdy that money. I get it. It's the nature of the business. It's the market. I do think, though, what's really going to matter here now, there is something interesting about the deal, and that is, as all these quarterbacks have signed, like Tua, Trevor, Burrow, Lamar, at the time of signing, all of these guys were well over 20% of their team's cap. Because the cap is going up, and the number they settled on, Brock is only 19% of the 49ers cap. And now the salary cap is going to keep going up and up and up and up. So by the time we're in year 3 of this deal, he's going to be around 14, 15%. That's huge. Because if the Niners believe in John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan the way I believe they do, and the way I believe they should, I think John Lynch is one of the best GMs. I think, obviously, Kyle Shanahan is one of the best head coaches. Now, they have not drafted exceptionally well the last couple of years. Now, part of that is because the Trey Lance trade, they traded away a bunch of first-round picks because at the time they were so loaded with guys, a first-round pick didn't really matter because they weren't going to play. But if they believe that they can draft super well over this next year to 2 years, by the time they hit year 3, and again, they just reset. Bosa's still under extension. They just signed Kittle. They re-signed Fred Warner. If they can draft really well in 2 to 3 years, they're going to be back in a similar position that they've been in, which is one of the most talented teams in the NFL. They're going to be able to put out multiple Pro Bowlers, all-pro guys, while still keeping the guys who they believe are the core. Now, Trent Williams, his contract, he's going to retire at some point here. I don't think he's going to play football into his 40s. But they're still going to have Fred. They're still going to have Bosa. They're still going to have Brandon Ayuk. We'll see how he looks after the injury. They're still going to have Kittle. McCaffrey will probably, by that point, they'll have transition to another running back. But if they believe in John Lynch, his ability to draft for these next couple of years, Kyle Shanahan, his ability as a head coach, this isn't a bad contract. Would I have given it to Purdy? No, I've said multiple times I wouldn't pay Purdy in the 50s. But the reality is, and what people have to say, and myself, I have to start looking at this too. Yes, there is a line of, are you willing to pay the guy or not? But once you've crossed that threshold of, are you going to pay the guy or not, for the guys that are on the lower end, right? Like, no one's going to dispute paying Mahomes, dispute paying Burrow, dispute paying Lamar. Those are the best in the league, Josh Allen. But once you have to pay these because those guys don't exist, or not that many of them exist, when you have to pay a Tua, when you have to pay a Purdy, when you have to pay, in my opinion, Jordan Love, these guys who are on the riskier end or the lower end of the $50 million club, the next best thing you can do is just set yourself up around them. And the 49ers did that. They are going to be able to draft, replenish the roster. Purdy's under 20% of the cap, which gives him some flexibility. John Lynch has been a good drafter in the past. Again, not great the last couple of years. I attribute some of that to the Trey Lance trade. So they do have a weak schedule, but you guys know how I feel about strength of schedule. I don't think that shit matters. But I do think this Niners team has a chance to rebound, even if it's not exactly this year. I think over the course of these 5 years, we will see the Niners being a very relevant, very competitive NFC team, potentially fighting for and getting to an NFC championship game. This is HardFoul Radio, hour 2 coming up after the break. And we are back. This is hour 2 of HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in as always. So today we are going to make our 2 boldest predictions as far as positive predictions. Our 2 biggest, I don't know about surprises, maybe surprises depending on how you feel. And then tomorrow is going to be our 2 biggest disappointments. So positivity today will be negative tomorrow. So, and it's going to be one NFC, one AFC the same tomorrow. That is our biggest surprise biggest surprise. And tomorrow is going to be our biggest disappointments. One NFC, one AFC. So for the NFC, my biggest surprise, this is the year, and I've been critical of this team even around the draft, where I thought they were going to do something stupid in the draft, and they did something really smart. And that is the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons have been in this weird space of they're not dysfunctional, but they were just a very unserious franchise. They made a bunch of moves that felt unserious, not realistic, even to the point of last year where it all culminated where you signed Kirk Cousins to this big contract coming off of an injury and then use your top 10 pick on a quarterback, Michael Penix. And I like Michael Penix, but out of all the teams he could have gone to, no one had him going to Atlanta. And it was this weird scene in the draft room where Arthur Blank and the GM were like, what are we doing? And they've just been a very unserious franchise for years. This year, they did some moving around, traded away some picks, and they went and said, hey, look, sometimes it's just this simple. We can't get to the quarterback. We are on a almost decade-long streak of being inept at getting to the quarterback. Let's go get 2 pass rushers. Let's go get Javon Walker, who in a lot of people's eyes was the best pass rusher available. And then let's move back into the first round and get Pierce out of Tennessee, who there are some issues here, obviously, but talent-wise, maybe potentially walked away with the 2 best pass rushers in the draft. Just went really simple. We can't get to the quarterback. We have some decent pieces on defense. We got a corner. We had Justin Simmons. We'll see if they bring back. They had the other safety. They just got Bates from Cincinnati a few years ago. Like, we have pieces on defense. We just have such a horrible pass rush. Quarterbacks have forever against us. You're going to see with just the addition of these 2 guys, if that pass rush is just middle of the pack, this defense is going to be tremendously better. Tremendously. Because it wasn't like, again, sometimes it's just simple. It wasn't necessarily a scheme thing. It wasn't necessarily a talent thing. It was just, we can't get to the quarterback at a horrifically low rate. I think it's 5 of the last 6 years or 5 of the last 7 years. They've either been last or second to last in sacks. So we're going to get 2 guys who immediately are going to boost our pass rush. Secondly, Michael Penix, and this is probably putting a lot here, I think we are looking at one of the best quarterback classes of all time in terms of last year. I think Caleb, Jayden, Drake May, Penix, McCarthy, and Nix, I'm putting my flag on the ground now. Obviously, 2 of the 6, Bo and Jayden both got their teams to the playoffs. So they had immediate success. Penix didn't start the season, but I liked a lot once he started playing. Drake May, I think, showed the flashes and potential of what's going to make a really good NFL quarterback. New England was obviously essentially talentless last year, so there were issues there, but it was issues as a team. It wasn't so much issues as the player. So I think he's going to be really good. Caleb, again, there was a lot of dysfunction in Chicago, but I believe he's still going to be really good. That leaves the last 2 guys, McCarthy, who I'm really high on Kevin O'Connell. I think it's going to be kind of impossible for McCarthy to fail with Kevin O'Connell, with Justin Jefferson, with Addison, with the offensive line they've built. So I think McCarthy's really good, which really just leaves Penix, who, with London, with the forever conversation, I guess, of is this Kyle Pitts year? Bijan Robinson, Atlanta's O-line, while it's unfortunate they lost their center to the Bears, I still think they have a good enough O-line. I think we're looking at an all-time quarterback draft class where we have 6 quality starters. And so because of Penix, because I think this defense is going to be improved, they are playing a third-place schedule, which, again, I'm not a strength of schedule guy, but when you are a third or fourth-place team, it is easier for you to improve because you're playing other bad teams. And the other bad teams, I don't feel like addressed their as easily glaring of need as the Falcons did. Falcons needed pass rushers. Real simple. They went and got maybe the 2 most talented, one who was consensus, the other who was some character issues, but people still really loved the talent. So if they're just a middle-of-the-pack pass rush team, they were 28th in total defense last year, which isn't good. But if a lot of that is predicated on they just didn't have a pass rush whatsoever. They are now, I believe, going to have a pass rush. I think Penix is finally going to make all these offensive pieces they've drafted over the last couple of years that's going to make it work. Again, Robinson, Pitts, London. The offensive line, I think, is, again, it's not great, but I think it'll be fine. Penix showed the flashes. I really like Atlanta. And their division is not exceptionally tough. The Saints, I believe, are in the Arch Manning sweepstakes. The Panthers, while I really like what Bryce and Canales were doing towards the end of last year, they're still probably a draft or 2 away. So that leaves really just you and the Buccaneers, who the Buccaneers should be the favorites walking into the season, 1,000%. Like, if you're a betting man, go put your money on the Bucs. The problem is the Bucs being who they are. The Bucs are just a lot of really good. The Bucs don't exactly have a lot of great. The Bucs are Baker's really good. I'm not sure Baker's in the great category. Their receivers, Mike Evans is historically is great, but on a season per season basis, he's in the really good category. They just drafted Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. I just messed up his name. I apologize. But we also have Chris Godwin, who's coming off an injury. Their offensive line's good. Tristan Wirfs himself is fantastic. All pro at both left tackle and right tackle. He's amazing. But as a whole, this is a really good team. I don't think it's a great team, which means I don't think they're uncatchable. So the Falcons, don't be shocked if we're sitting up here. The Falcons are an 11-12 win team, and they are winning the NFC South. I like a lot about Atlanta. Again, sometimes it is just as simple as what's our biggest need and can we fix that? Because that's the reason why we're losing so many of these games. They almost beat the Chargers last year in a game where Kirk Cousins threw 4 interceptions. Think about that. And some of the worst interceptions you'll ever see in your life. The other, and this is where I'm going to get the most flack for, but I don't care. My bold prediction for the AFC, the Denver Broncos win 12 games and win the AFC West. I've been on this for about the better part of 2 to 3 months, and I'm just ready to go all the way. Look, when you if you've ever seen on Twitter, they'll post like position groups, and they'll say who's got the best position group in all of these, right? So like they'll go QB, running back, receiver, O-line, and they'll go over to D-line, linebacker, safety. In the AFC West, okay, quarterback, obviously you still got to give it to Mahomes. Bo Nix is, now I think Bo is better than Geno, but if you're going to say Bo's the 4th best quarterback in the division, I disagree, but I'm not here to argue with people. I'm over having Bo Nix arguments. Running back, Raiders, Chargers, depending on how you want to be on Ash and Genty. Cool. Receivers, Cortland Sutton's the best receiver in the AFC West. Like, the Chiefs receivers, I know they're fast, and there's this, we want to get Mahomes back to this high-flying offense, but the Chiefs don't have a better receiver than Cortland Sutton. The Raiders don't have a better receiver than Cortland Sutton. And the Chargers, if you tell me Ladd McConkey, well, Charger fans, you don't even believe that because I hear the way you talk about your receiver and core during the games. Now, do you need more than just Cortland Sutton? 1,000%. Let the other guys, Marvin Mims, who came on the end of last season, they've got Troy Franklin, who's got the connection with Bo from Oregon, plus they just drafted another guy, Bryant. Let those guys be elevated by Sean Payton. At tight end, it's the Raiders. Clearly, Brock Bowers is probably the best tight end in football. Travis Kelce is aging. Evan Ingram is an improvement over what Denver had last year. Cool. Right? So we just went QB, receiver, running back, tight end. Now let's look at every other position group. Offensive line, it's Denver, and it's not close. I know Chargers have the 2 great tackles, and I'm not trying to – they are great, but there's some greatness in name that is not necessarily greatness on field. The Broncos, even with those 2 stalwart tackles, the Broncos were better offensive line by PFF and grade, and every metric you could find were better by a mile. The only offensive lines that performed better than Denver's last year were Detroit and Philadelphia. That was the class, and then there's a drop-off. That was the class of offensive line Denver was in. Bowles, McGlinchey as your 2 tackles. Quinn Miners, who is Quentin Nelson has the I am the best guard, so you have to come get my title. But Quinn Miners is as good as anybody, and I would argue he's even just as good as Quentin Nelson. What they brought over, the guard they brought over from Baltimore, and even at center when they lost like Denver's offensive line, best in the, it's besides Detroit and Philadelphia, it's the best offensive line. Ben Powers, I'm just blanking on Ben Powers' name, I apologize. Offensive line, Denver. Defensive line, it's Denver. And it's not, again, this is not particularly close. Chris Jones in name and Khalil Mack in name are going to give the Chargers and Chiefs fans some, and Max Crosby in name are going to be like, oh, well, they're the best high-end player. But John Franklin Myers, Zach Allen, who should have been first-team All-Pro, those guys, and what they just, remember, the Broncos defense just led the league in sacks. And that's without a Max Crosby. That's without a Khalil Mack. That's without a Chris Jones. Just led the NFL in sacks. Linebackers, again, Benito, Cooper, they just brought in Greenlaw. Denver has the best linebackers. Go to secondary, go to corners. They're just secondary as a whole. It's, again, Denver, and it's not particularly close. And that's with, now Riley Moss, I know some people are going to be iffy on, we'll see where it happens, but Surtain, Moss, McMillan, who was one of the best slot corners in the NFL last year. You added Jahdae Barron in the draft. You have Brandon Jones. Like, this defense, defensively, Denver has the best defense in there. At receiver, I think they have the best individual receiver. And if you want to go with coaching, I get Jim Harbaugh gets this credit for what he did with the Niners, which he deserves, and what he did in college. But why is his resume, it's impressive that he's both collegiate and professional. Fine. And Pete Carroll somewhat has that too. But in 2025, why are we considering them better than Sean Payton? Andy Reid, fine. Andy Reid's in a class by himself. And this is the best coach division in football. So I've got the second best coach. I've got the best individual receiver. I have the best offensive line and defense. This is the defense that should be top 3, if not the best defense in the NFL. I get a good start to the schedule because I get to introduce, Denver starts their season at home against Cam Ward. So you want to talk about a confidence boost? Cam Ward in his first ever NFL game having to go against that defense in Mile High. I get another year with Bo Nix and Sean Payton, who, again, I'm not having the Bo Nix argument saying one anymore. You want to say Bo was the worst quarterback of the last year, he's this, he's that, fine. Him and Sean Payton work. I think the Chiefs are going to be worse. I don't think they actually address their offensive line in a meaningful way. Like, their offensive line, the way they attempted to fix it was high-end potential, but a lot of risk. We're going to get the Trent Williams backup and the kid out of Ohio State who's coming off an injury, and maybe this will be amazing. Maybe we'll also have 2 injury-riddled tackles, and our offensive line will continue to be what it is, which is injury-riddled, moving guys all over the place, and Patrick's going to be running for his life. Traded away Joe Thuney. The Raiders, I think the Raiders will be better because they just got significantly better at head coach and quarterback. I still think they're going to be the 4th-place team. And the Chargers, while Denver needs to prove they can beat the Chargers, they did go 0-2 against them last year. I think, which is funny because almost anyone you've seen put out a Denver prediction schedule, they have the Chargers being their first loss, which I get. But again, I just feel like they're better. I think defensively they're better. The Chargers are a weirdly built team, in my opinion, that Justin Herbert's clearly your best player and your franchise quarterback, and yet you want to run the ball 40 times. So my bold prediction, Denver gets 12 wins. That wins the AFC West, which is going to be tightly contested. And the Atlanta Falcons win the NFC South. They also get to 11-12 wins to win that division. Tomorrow we will go over our 2 biggest disappointments. But Falcons, Broncos, division winners 2025. You heard it here first. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily. So for people that think the NBA draft was rigged, now again, I talked about this last week, and I said I don't really care if it was or not. To some degree, this is entertainment. There is things that, if something funny is done here or there to create a more compelling storyline or to drive more money to a city, I'm not going to be overly shocked if it happens. Shaq came out a day or two ago and said, hey, look, and I'm not saying I believe this 100%. I'm just saying it doesn't feel totally unbelievable that David Stern looked at him and said, do you want to play where it's cold? Do you want to play where it's hot? And Shaq said hot, and then he's with the Magic. Look, and then again, Wemby finding his way to the Spurs, the Pelicans getting 2 picks after trading a guy. The Mavericks did do a lot to try to not have a lottery pick whatsoever. They rushed AD back from injury. They were in the play-in, and so there were things they were doing that would make this theory fall flat on its face, just be wrong. I know the conspiracy theorists, they had a wonderful time post the NBA draft. So, congrats to them, right? But it wouldn't shock me. It just wasn't a big deal. If you want to see the NFL conspiracy theories go, now there's no lottery, so it's just teams got to be bad. But Arch Manning, who is projected by a lot of people. Now, there's a lot of quarterbacks coming out in this year's draft class, so it's going to be a more contentious for the number 1 spot. And it's just better quality of players, especially than what we just had this last year. A lot of people have been saying, is one of the things going into the draft was like, Cam and Shador, would they have been the 8th quarterback or the 7th quarterback last year? Or would they be the 6th or 7th quarterback this following year? It's considered a weaker class to what's coming out. I do think it's funny, though, that 2 teams that are going to be in the Arch Manning sweepstakes just so happen to be the Colts and Saints. And the Giants, if they didn't draft Jackson Dart, I think they would have been here too, which would have been the perfect Manning trifecta. That the Giants, Saints, and Colts all would be going for Arch Manning, because I think they'd all be bad enough. Now, the Giants drafted Jackson Dart, so barring a total collapse, like if Jackson Dart gets in there and just looks terrible for 9-10 weeks, then maybe they find their way back into this, but I don't think that's possible. I think Dable is a good enough head coach that if Jackson Dart is just semi-talented, that team will work. And the Giants have some talent. Left tackle, D-line, like they got some players. Malik Neighbors as well, obviously. But the Saints and Colts, now that Derek Carr retired, not that Derek Carr was going to be the difference maker in going, 6-10 versus, or 6-11. My brain's still on 16 games, guys. I grew up with it. 6-11 versus 3-14, maybe. So the Saints have no plan at quarterback. Derek Carr just retired. They drafted a guy who has one of the worst combine throws you've ever seen in Tyler's show. This is not gonna. I know Saints Twitter and Saints fans and Saints players are always like, well, we're really good. We're gonna surprise some people. I'm not going to put you on biggest disappointments next year when I do this tomorrow, because I don't think there's a whole lot of optimism here to begin with. I think your optimism starts at the draft and the ability to potentially get to go from talk about storylines. What if we did go from Archie Manning, the Aints, the paper bags, we know the history, to 40 years later, to Arch Manning. And what if he is your next franchise quarterback? Same with the Colts. What are the Colts doing at quarterback? Do the Colts know what they're doing at quarterback? Because the Colts a few years ago drafted Anthony Richardson, who by all accounts was this super raw, super super raw. It needed work, needed to be developed. A guy who was not ready to be an NFL quarterback by anyone's estimation, had not played enough games. And they said, we want you to be, now all the talent in the world. If you've seen Anthony Richardson's best throws, you would go, oh, he's clearly the best quarterback in like football history. His best throws look amazing. He can just There was the throw against the Texans last year, week one, week 2, where he flat foots, throws 60 yards on a rope and hits the guy for a touchdown. And he could do stuff like that. He is just otherworldly alien talent. He also struggles to complete 50% of his passes. He's one of those guys, he's really fun to watch. I'm just glad it's not on the team I root for. Because otherwise he would be the most frustrating guy to watch. So, you have Anthony Richardson, who you did not give enough time, which shows because you benched him for a 40-year-old in Joe Flacco. So you did not give him the time to produce or to develop or to be the guy that we knew was the experimental guy coming out of college, the guy who we knew needed to be developed more, the guy who we knew was not ready to play day one. You took him out of that opportunity. And now you bring in Daniel Jones, who the other team that I thought was going to be in the Arch Manning sweepstakes, being the Giants, couldn't get right with Brian Dable and some good offensive talent. Yeah, he got to the playoffs. He got to the playoffs throwing 15 touchdowns, by the way. Like, that has to be studied at some point. So, the Colts, Saints, no idea what we're doing at quarterback. These are the teams who are going to be in the Arch Manning sweepstakes. And what a year, because even if you don't get Arch, who's, again, is probably going to be the number one guy, there's several quarterbacks by actual experts, people that know college football better than me, even though I'm getting into it this year, who know the prospects better, who follow the draft more, who follow college football more. This is considered one of the best quarterback classes as a whole. So, sometimes it's just, maybe this is designed tanking and how it works. Because if you're the Saints, you are in such cap hell that you would need a rookie quarterback to be good, to help to be good/great to reset all the cap hell that you're in. And if you are the Colts, you're not in cap hell, but you are in, what are we doing now? There doesn't seem to be a clear direction. There doesn't seem to be a clear focus. There doesn't seem to be a clear goal. You have an impatient and crazy owner who, now, if you're the Colts, the only thing, now we know how the Manning family works. If you're the Colts, did you burn your bridge with Peyton that bad that another family member won't go there? I joke all the time that Peyton, and I joke with Tony, Peyton wants to be only known as a Bronco, which is insane. Now, I love it, but it's insane considering how long he was a Colt. But he does not affiliate himself with that organization. He doesn't go to a lot of games, but you always see him in Colorado. You see him at Rockies games, despite how horrible they are. You see him at Nuggets games. You see him at Broncos games. Everything about Peyton is very Denver, Colorado themed, Denver, Colorado based. So did you burn your bridge with the Manning family that badly that Arch just won't go play for you? It's the one family that successfully pulled off, hey, we're going to choose where we go. So if you're the Colts, did you burn that bridge that badly? Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals is tonight, and it's Knicks Pacers. Somehow I went from not believing in the Pacers whatsoever to now I'm hoping they win. Look, I understand the story of New York and how, again, if you're my age, the Knicks have actually never been really good or great in your lifetime. The closest they've probably been is maybe that Melo team that ran up against the Heat and LeBron, which was just, unfortunate timing. That's probably your best one. But this Knicks team actually in the Eastern Conference Finals actually has a chance to succeed, actually has a chance to go to the NBA Finals. I think I'd rather have the Pacers. And that's because I have this huge worry. We just spent the whole opening block talking about the product of the NBA, the way the game looks, and is that team that's going to, do fans enjoy that? I don't want to see an NBA Finals of SGA and Jalen Brunson flopping all over the place. And I know maybe this is a lazy take, and there's some basketball purist out there who's going to tell me, well, you're not really watching the games. Well, I just watched SGA last night fall all over the place. And then, for whatever reason, the refs rewarded every single time damn near. And then when they go on defense, the Thunder are allowed to play tackle football. And if your best player gets mugged, well, who cares? And the broadcast is so disingenuous that they're like, wow, look at the defense they're playing. I was like, yeah, but if anybody reached in on SGA, it's a foul. But Alex Caruso can reach in, push, do a million different things to Anthony Edwards, and we can't do anything about it. They're allowed, like, the Thunder's defense feels swarming. Of course it does. They're physically touching you. They're physically getting in your face. And that'd be fine, and I wouldn't have an issue if we just did the simple fact of, can we have it both ways? Is the other team also allowed to play physical? No, instead what we get is, they always say it's not who threw, we don't ever catch the guy that did first, we always catch the retaliation. What the Thunder do is they piss you off, and then you respond by playing physically against them. And after you respond, now we're calling fouls. Because obviously you're a little more animated because you've been getting this style played against you all game, and the refs aren't calling anything, and you try to ignore it, but it takes away possessions because they can't just push you around. They can be extra handsy, and they're not calling it. And then you retaliate, and then we're calling the retaliation. Like, I just don't want an NBA Finals of that. So as someone who did not give the Pacers a lot of credit, as someone who did not give the Pacers a really big chance to be this, I'm here for it. Give me the Pacers in the NBA Finals. Give me ball movement. Give me a true point guard. Give me real offense. Give me a basketball product that I'm going to enjoy watching. Not saying they don't flop a little bit. Not saying they don't get away with some stuff. And again, I said this about SGA. SGA is an amazing mid-range shooter. SGA is the MVP. SGA is a great basketball player. But just because you're a great basketball player does not mean that you don't play a degenerate style. Maybe I just really owe James Harden an apology. Maybe that's what I do. I was so adamant against, from early on, James Harden's play style and saying, I don't like this. This does not look like good basketball. This is not something that I want to watch. I don't think it's good for TV, And I would rather watch James Harden 1,000 times over before watching what OKC does. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll come back with closing statements.
Yeah, we are back to closing statements for today. Look, as much as we did for the first segment about the AA and product before with underlying, I'm still sticking with my pick. I think the Timberwolves do rebound. I think they get game two. I think they will both the game home, and then they either win 5 or 6. 6 is probably the safe pick. What the Timberwolves do really well is adjust.